Hello again. This is Keith. Welcome to Keith Speaks. My goal here is, at the very least, just to start the conversation. So, look, I'm going to talk straight with you because that's what I do here. If you've been riding with MAGA, feeling like outsiders are the threat, feeling like you need to protect what's yours, I get where that fear comes from, imagined as it may be, but fear is real. It's human. But let me show you something you might not see yet. Actually, let me show you the oldest pattern in the book. You've been told the enemy is at the border, that it's the immigrants, the others, the people who don't look like you trying to invade and replace you. But you also have been told the enemy's already inside your country. Black Americans who are too loud about inequality. Immigrants who've been here for generations but still don't belong. Native peoples who have the audacity to want their treaty rights honored. Anyone speaking Spanish, wearing hijab, or practicing the wrong religion. Your neighbors who think differently, vote differently, believe differently. You're being told everyone who isn't exactly like you is the threat, that they're coming to take what's yours, that they're destroying your country, that they're invaders who don't respect your values, your culture, your way of life. Let me ask you something. Does that sound familiar? Because that's the exact playbook that's been run before, on this very soil, by the very people you're told to see as the real Americans. Let's talk about the original immigrants to this continent, because spoiler alert, it wasn't your ancestors who were here first. The pilgrims, the colonists, the Europeans who discovered America. Except you can't discover a place where millions of people already live. When those European ships landed, they didn't find empty wilderness. They found millions of indigenous people across the continent, estimates ranging from 5 to 15 million in North America alone. Sophisticated governmental structures, not primitive tribes, but complex, organized societies. The Iroquois Confederacy, a federal system so advanced that it influenced the U.S. Constitution itself, with separation of powers between civilian and military rule. Democratic councils, checks and balances. Diverse governance systems across hundreds of nations, from kinship-based bands to elaborate confederacies, utilizing councils, hereditary chiefs, consensus-based decision-making, and democratic practices. Communal land management and sovereignty principles. Sophisticated agriculture, trade networks, and social structures that have been functioning for thousands of years. And here's the kicker. Those pilgrims you celebrate at Thanksgiving, they would have died that first winter. It was the Wampanoag people, Squanto, Massasoit, and their communities who taught them how to survive, how to plant corn, how to fish these waters, how to live on this land. The indigenous peoples used their human nature of accepting and helping others. They extended hospitality to these desperate, struggling outsiders who showed up on their shores. And how did those grateful pilgrims and colonists respond? Watch the pattern. They accepted help from indigenous peoples to survive. They learned the land, the resources, the systems, grow in numbers and strength. They declared your helpers to be savages and threats. Use military force to take what was never yours. Justify it with religious superiority and manifest destiny. Write the history to make yourselves the heroes. This wasn't unique to America. This was the European cultural standard of conquest. Use hospitality against the hosts. Accept assistance when vulnerable. Turn on your benefactors when strong enough. Project your own violence onto them. Call them the threat while you commit genocide. Claim their land, resources, and sovereignty. Erase their systems and call them primitive. The indigenous peoples who helped the pilgrims survive, within a few generations, their children were being slaughtered, their land stolen, their governance systems destroyed, their populations reduced by 90% through disease, warfare, and forced removal. And here's where it gets really clear. Everything you're told to fear about immigrants and outsiders is exactly what the European colonizers actually did. You're told immigrants will not respect your culture. Colonizers destroyed indigenous cultures, languages, and religions. Take your resources. Colonizers stole an entire continent, not integrate. Colonizers forced everyone to integrate to their ways. Be violent. Colonizers committed systematic genocide, not respect your laws. Colonizers ignored all treaties and indigenous sovereignty. Replace you. Colonizers literally replaced millions of indigenous people. Change your way of life. Colonizers ended thousands of years of indigenous civilizations. This is a projection on a continental scale. The descendants of people who used hospitality to commit genocide are now afraid someone might do to them what they did to others. So when they tell you to fear the enemy inside, Black Americans, Native peoples, immigrants who've been here for generations, ask yourself, who actually invaded? Who actually refused to integrate into existing societies? Who actually destroyed a way of life? Who actually took resources by force? Who actually changed everything? The people you're being told to fear as enemies inside your country are the descendants of the original inhabitants who've been here for 15,000 plus years. Enslaved peoples who were brought here in chains and built this economy with their unpaid labor. Immigrants who've been coming here for generations and building communities. Meanwhile, you're being manipulated by the same playbook that was used to justify genocide. They're savages. They're threats. They're not like us. They don't belong. They're destroying our way of life. We need to protect ourselves. We need strong leaders. We need to fight back. It's us or them. Here's the truly wild part. Those enemies you're told to fear, the ones who with actual community survival skills because they've had to build them despite the European conquest model trying to destroy them. Indigenous peoples maintain tribal governance and sovereignty, communal resource sharing, multi-generational knowledge transfer, connection to land and sustainable practices, council-based decision-making, community over individualism. Despite 500 plus years of genocide, forced removal, boarding schools, and cultural erasure. Black Americans built churches and mutual aid societies, underground railroads and civil rights networks, extended family structures, community defense systems, economic cooperatives, cultural preservation through music, food, storytelling. Despite slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, mass incarceration, and systemic oppression. Immigrant communities maintain multi-generational households, resource pooling and lending circles, language and cultural preservation, transnational support networks, small business ecosystems, community child care and elder care, despite xenophobia, discrimination, deportation threats, and being told they don't belong. They all survived the European conquest model by doing the opposite of what that model teaches, community over individualism. Meanwhile, you're being sold the same individualistic, conquest-minded us versus them mentality that destroys community bonds, makes you distrust your neighbors, cuts you off from collective support, tells you asking for help is weakness, promises a strong man will protect you, concentrates all power and resources at the top. You're being conditioned by the descendants of the European conquest class, the billionaires, the politicians, the corporate elite, to fear community organizing as socialism, reject mutual aid as handouts, see unions as enemies, distrust anyone different from you, believe you can make it alone, support authoritarian power consolidation. And all the while, they pool their resources. That's what corporations and trusts are. They network with each other. That's what country clubs and boards are. They help each other out. That's what nepotism in the old boys club is. Protect their own. That's what lawyers and lobbyists are for. They're using community and collective power while telling you it's un-American. Because here's the final pattern. The European conquest model didn't stop with indigenous genocide and African enslavement. It just evolved. Now it's conquering you, taking your labor and giving you stagnant wages, taking your resources and calling it the free market, taking your power and calling it liberty, taking your community and calling it individualism, taking your future and telling you to blame immigrants. The same families and systems that profited from stealing a continent and enslaving millions are now extracting everything from you, your wages, your health care, your housing security, your retirement, your children's futures. And they're using the same playbook. Make you afraid of others so you don't notice who's actually taking everything. The threat was never the people at the border, the black Americans demanding equality, the indigenous peoples asking for treaty rights, the immigrants working 3 jobs. The threat is the same system that's always been the threat, the conquest model. The extraction, the exploitation, the concentration of power, the turning of neighbor against neighbor, the destruction of community, the belief that some people are meant to rule and others are meant to serve. That's the European cultural standard that conquered this continent, and it's still running. Except now, you're not the conquistadors. You're not the colonizers. You're not the ruling class. You are the ones being colonized. Your resources extracted, your labor exploited, your communities destroyed, your power taken, all the while being told to blame the very people who know how to survive this. You've got a choice to make. You can keep riding with the fear, keep supporting the consolidation, keep cutting yourself off from community, keep seeing others as the threats, and become exactly what your ancestors did to indigenous peoples: isolated, vulnerable, and conquered. Or you can recognize the pattern. See that the European conquest model has turned on you. Understand that the communities you've been taught to fear are the only ones with proven survival strategies. And maybe, just maybe, learn from the peoples who survived genocide, slavery, and systemic oppression. Because when this authoritarian imperialistic system finishes consolidating, the billionaires will be fine. They've always been fine. The politicians, they'll be fine. They've always been fine. But you'll be exactly where enslaved people were, where indigenous people were, where immigrants are. Except they built community through it. They learned survival. They maintained their governance and mutual aid. They have each other. What will you have? Your ancestors came to this continent as immigrants. They were helped by the people already here, then they turned that help into conquest. Now you're afraid immigrants will do to you what your ancestors did to others. That's not their pattern. That's yours. The people at the border aren't coming to conquer. They're coming to survive. Black Americans demanding justice aren't the enemy. They're trying to dismantle the system that will eventually come for you too. The indigenous peoples protecting their sovereignty aren't threats. They're showing you what resistance to conquest actually looks like. They already know how to survive the system you're helping to build. Do you? Understand, I am not saying this to divide. I'm saying this because I see the pattern, the oldest pattern, and I'd rather you see it too before it's too late. The real strength was never in conquest. It was never in walls or strongmen or keeping people out. It was never in individualism or extraction or domination. It's in the networks we build, the communities we maintain, the ways we have each other's backs, the governance systems that prioritize consensus over control, the wisdom of communal survival over individual gain. That's not weakness. That's literally the one thing that's ever saved anyone from conquest. The indigenous peoples who were here first knew theirs. Their governance systems were more sophisticated than what replaced them. Black Americans who survived slavery and Jim Crow knew this. They built community when the system tried to break them. The immigrant communities knew this. They maintained mutual aid while being told they're the threat. They all learned it by surviving the European conquest model. Question is, when will you? Before this system finishes conquering you too. Thank you for your time again. This is Keith, and Keith Speaks. I welcome you to comment. Please do like, absolutely share. But Keith speaks, and I'm built different. Think different.